My guest today is writer and co-director Vanessa Estevez and the wonderful animated short film Christopher and the Bug. And rooted in Vanessa's passion for character-driven storytelling, the film reflects a deeply human experience through a playful and accessible animated lens. Now, she is an animation magazine rising star and co-creator of Super Wish and has built her career crafting stories that blend humor, heart, and the imaginative world building of global family audiences. Now, her work across beloved series such as Max and Ruby, Handy, Manny, and Ranger Rob informs the film's warmth and emotional clarity, creating a story that resonates across generations. But with a blend of humor, heart, and universal themes, Christopher and the Bug stands out as a joyful and meaningful animated short that speaks to audiences of all ages, and it's a selection at the 50th Cleveland International Film Festival, marking an exciting milestone, introducing a story that gently reminds us of the importance of empathy, inclusion, and unexpected connections that can change our lives. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome writer-director Vanessa Estevez and her animated short film, Christopher and the Bug, to the show. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it is great to see such a stellar animated short film like Christopher and the Bug. I fell in love at the moment I started watching it because there was just so much there. So, where did you get such a wonderful idea for the story?
Well, this story has actually been with me for quite a while. I wrote it just coming out of film school, so it's been a minute. But it was originally based on a not so great experience I had with a roommate at the time. And full transparency, I was Christopher in that experience. So it started off being rooted in a very real experience of having this, person in my life that I um, didn't really want to be there. And I had crafted the film to be a little more comedic and dark at the time. But I sat with the story for a while, and then every time I would check back in with it, I would be in a new era of my life, I guess. And I would do a new rewrite. So the story really went from being a moment of just complete frustration with another human being to turning into something a lot bigger than that. Because as I got older, I realized that this was more of a metaphor for anything in our lives that we might find causes us frustration or that we just push away because it's something different. And then it really took on more of a larger all ages feel. And that's where we landed with it. It ended up being an animated story about an owl and a bug.
Well, this story covers friendship, empathy, inclusion. Um, It kind of reminded me a bit, maybe some of the elements reminded me of myself because the fact is, a lot of creatives, they work by themselves,
Hmm.
and then, yes, in film, we love working with others, we love teamwork, but when you're in that mode of creativity, you're like, everybody just stay away and don't bother me. It's,
So true. It's so true. I had
so I,
somebody once tell me that the bug represented executive notes for them as a writer, that they just wanted to be left alone, and these notes just kept coming. And I thought that was really neat because I've heard different things from different people who've screened it that the bug is meant something different to them.
I love that. Now, you also highlight the peaceful solitude that Christopher seems to enjoy. And you have this
Hmm.
flashback in the film where it's showing Christopher as a little owl,
Yeah.
I guess on the school playground. But there was a very profound line of dialogue in the narration: shyness
Hmm.
to passiveness to bitterness. And I really had to pause it and sit there and think just how powerful that line was, and then continue watching the film to see where just that line
Hmm.
works and comes alive. But wouldn't you say that the bitterness in this case was Christopher creating a false sense of solitude, and maybe he wore it uh, to protect himself from getting hurt?
100%. You are exactly right. Yeah, when that line of dialogue hits, it's earlier on in the film, and the script hasn't quite changed with Christopher yet. So he's still feeling that shell, I guess, of protective. It's not loneliness at this point. He's made that decision that there's people around him he could welcome in, but he hasn't because it's been years of being on his own. And I think that really is what makes Christopher so human too, because that's a real thing for, yeah, a lot of people, right? They have that experience growing up where maybe they didn't quite fit in, and rather than be okay with not fitting in, and they just sort of build this protective cocoon, and then it becomes part of who they are until they change.
Well, what I also love too is the shyness, the passiveness, and the bitterness. It actually shows up on Christopher's face in
Yeah.
some of those the first half of that film. So I loved how that one line of dialogue translates to what the viewer sees in the film when Christopher is, let's just say that he's interacting in his own world. He hasn't interacted with
Right.
others just
That's right.
yet. So I love
Hmm.
that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's you took from it exactly what we were hoping the audience would take from it, so that's great to hear.
Well, now there's a scene in the film which it has there's one scene and then the scene comes alive again later in the film. But Christopher built birdhouses, and
Yes.
I'm looking at that and I'm like, now that is really strange because he never shared them with anyone and he kept them indoors, which was odd. And
Hmm.
so I kept looking at it and looking at it over and over and over again. And to me, what he created was really for someone else to enjoy, but his
Hmm.
shyness really became his own cage, so to speak, didn't it?
That's right. It absolutely did. And he had the opportunity early on in the film to let others in to share his beautiful houses with others, and he actively chose not to. So he was kind of setting up that own cage himself.
Yeah, and I think, and millions, if not billions of people around the world, they create a cage that they stay
Hmm.
in and don't realize that there's not a lock on the door.
That's true. That's true. That's a really good way to put it. There's
You know,
not. And I think, yeah, Christopher, he gets there in the end. It's funny that the loneliness in this story, um, it's interesting because the story was written before COVID happened. And then the script won at Holly Shorts during COVID. And then afterwards, when we moved into a little bit more development and, we started to produce the film, we all had that shared experience of a little bit of what Christopher went through. It wasn't, we didn't choose that, but we had all lived through it. And I think a lot of people on the crew kind of could understand Christopher a bit more because we had just lived through that. So it was really strange the timing of how the story was written. And then we all lived through this, and then we produced the film.
Wow, it's funny because with the pandemic, so many people had to start working from home and they got
Hmm.
used to that.
That's
You know,
right.
yeah, the only groaning is if a Zoom meeting came up. And it's like, oh, I've got to interact with people.
That's
Yeah, so,
right. Just time to put on some work clothes.
yeah, we all became Christopher at that point, didn't we?
We did. It's true.
Well, I liked how the bug just made his way into Christopher's life, not
Hmm.
asking permission, just being the bug that he is.
Yep.
Bugs are a nuisance, but this nuisance was leading Christopher to break out of his own shell, no pun intended. So the bug was the catalyst.
The bug was the catalyst. Yep. It showed up just when Christopher needed it, and then played its part in his life and moved on. And that was sort of always meant to be a metaphor for whatever the audience needed it to be at that time. We had asked, or we had been asked to show the bug a couple times during development. How cute would it be in animation, the big eyes? And I really dug in my heels on that point because if I showed you the bug, it's going to be a film about an owl and a bug. And if I don't show you the bug, then really it can be whatever you want it to be. And that's where we wanted it to sit in a metaphorical place of, what is the bug for you in the audience? Do you have something that you're pushing away or that you just have decided you don't like and therefore it should not be in your life? And if you took a second look at that and asked yourself, well, what if I just made peace with it or made friends with it or welcomed it in? Would that change me for the better? I mean, the answer is not always going to be yes, but sometimes it is. So that's kind of what that bug represented.
I'm glad you dug your heels in on that because now that I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, if we saw
Hmm.
the bug in a way would become equal with Christopher. We would
That's
then
right.
be looking at a owl bug situation. It's almost like the Odd Couple.
Right.
And then you
Right.
have two people sharing the same stage where the
Hmm.
focus, like you said, it's on Christopher. It's on, you know, how one comes out of their shell by and a force that is pushing them to be better,
Right.
to be
That's right.
better. So
Hmm.
and friendship has a way of making its way into someone's life in the utmost unexpected times and really possibly even like with this film, possibly the perfect time, and that's how I saw your story.
That's right. Yeah. And that's really what we were hoping people would take from it because it's a story about friendship, but it's also a story about, changing for the better. And it's never too late to change, right? Christopher's not a young owl anymore, but he finds this catalyst in his older years, and now he's got nothing but sunny skies to look forward to.
When Christopher just got fed up and he builds this shack, this little tiny shack that he can barely fit in.
My
I
favorite.
I was, when I was watched that scene, it reminds me of times that we can be, what's the perfect word for that? It's not bitter. We're
Stubborn.
making a mountain out of a molehill.
Absolutely. Yep. That's exactly it. And I think that that moment, it's my favorite moment in the whole film because I think it's true. Like, I, as a human, have dug in my heels so firmly on something because I refused to accept anything else. And I was stubborn and I would cause a great deal of discomfort for myself just to prove a point. Right. And I think that is exactly what Christopher's doing there. He creates this ridiculous shack on his own front yard just to not have to live with this tiny bug. And I think it's a really big moment for his character, um, because he's not seeing what everybody else is seeing at that point. Like, just be okay with it. Like, why are you? This is a lot worse than it could be. And it was a really fun moment to build with the score and the animation. It's a great moment for him.
Well, it's that type of moment, even for humankind, where you get to the point and you're like, why am I acting out of spite? I'm only
Hmm.
hurting myself. The
Hmm.
bug isn't really receiving anything negative
Nope.
from that. You just gave him a big old house to enjoy
That's
by
right.
himself. But
That's right.
uh but that whole, like you said, that scene was a turning point, and then it starts to change the essence of the film. And I loved the neighbor across the street from Christopher. I don't want to give it
Yeah.
away, but that character played a wonderful role in the film, didn't he?
He's great. The crew loved that character. I know we don't see him very often, but when we do, he's impactful. We had a lot of fun figuring out what animal we were going to make him as well, because it could have been a lot of things, but we think he ended up just perfect.
He did. He did. Now tell me about the style of animation that you chose for your film. I know with animation there are a million ways to go, but you chose the classic 2D animation.
Yes. So it started live action the first time. The first script draft of the script, it was meant to be a man, like a human man and a bug, and it was going to be live action. And then as my career moved on, I spent a lot of time focusing on children's animation. and children's entertainment. So it just felt right to bring the story into the animated world. And it was a bit darker when it was live action. So making it animated, I got to truly make this film. We call it a zero to 100 age demographic. But it was potentially going to be in CG when we started, and we did model out Christopher to see what he would look like in CG, and it didn't feel right. So we moved towards 2D animation. That's when my co-director Kevin McAuliffe joined me, and we really just found that the classic 2D, classic Disney look was the best way to tell this bedtime story for adults. And then Don Gautier, our art director, joined, and he has such a painterly quality to his art style that it all just fell into place. And it was really the only way to tell the story at that point, which informed the score, which has sort of a classic feel to it, and the narration. Benedict Campbell feels sort of like the films that we would have seen growing up.
You know, it's there were a couple of animated films last year that
Mhm.
I hate to use the term Disney look, but that's what it is. And
Yep.
but the greatest thing about that look is that regardless how old or how young the audience is, it's that look that
Hmm.
everybody still gravitates to as, for me, it's at the top for animation. And I know now that they're using computers to draw on. I've talked to longtime Disney animators who did everything by hand and then
Yep.
had to learn to convert into the computer style, which didn't
Yeah,
didn't take away their talent. You're just drawing on a different surface.
it's true.
But the art was still there.
Hmm.
And when I saw your
Absolutely.
film, I was like, oh, this is incredible. Because even Disney made the announcement, I think, what, a couple of months ago, that they're working on a hand drawn, full length animated feature. And it's about time because I don't ever want to see the art of 2D animation go because yeah,
That's it. Yeah.
and you're right. Like you looked at Christopher in a CG style. And I
Hmm.
and I don't mind 3D animation
Hmm.
if it fits the story,
Well, that's just it. Yeah. It's got to fit.
and
It's got to be the
yeah,
right medium.
and I love stop motion for people who have that kind of patience and that kind of talent. Stop motion, was it claymation, all of
Hmm.
those things, just incredible, incredible talents. And but this film, oh my gosh,
Oh,
it takes you back. I mean, this story could have been done in the 1950s and it
it
would
could have.
still be modern today. That's the beauty of this film.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I think that's we were trying to tap into that part of humanity that hasn't changed, right? This is, as you say, it could be a story from a different generation. It's at the core just about friendship. And that scene of Christopher being young, it could have shaped the rest of the narrative, right? We wouldn't have had a film if Christopher had have made friends on the schoolyard back when he was in grade kindergarten or grade six. And I think that's what makes this story so relatable to a lot of people is you can either relate to him being a kid or you've probably felt this way as an adult, but at some point in your life you felt that. And that's really, we were just trying to make it something that would connect with the most people in the audience that we possibly could.
Well, how many animators did it take to create such incredible artistry?
I am so glad that you asked that question. One, it took one animator. Her name is Samantha Van Rooselaar, and she did our first scene for us in development. It was the Christmas tree market scene. That's what we did as like a proof of concept. And she did such an amazing job with it that my co-producer Lydia and I thought, why don't we just give her the runway that she needs rather than do it in a shorter amount of time and put more people on the project? If we gave Samantha more time and just let her tell the story from start to finish, wouldn't that be neat? And that's what we did. So it took longer to produce, but everyone was kind of doing it off the sides of their desks. Everybody had a full-time job, so it was a passion project. And Samantha did every single frame of that film. So that's quite
How,
something.
well, then how long did it take from concept to completion?
From concept to completion, it was probably 20 years from the first iteration of the script. But the actual, this 20, this version of it, it took us about 18 months from the start in development to bringing Samantha on and letting her animate. And then we would, obviously go and start the post process on what we could. It was really a small team on this one. So we worked in a kind of unusual pipeline. But I think it's fair to say 18 months from the start to the finish.
Wow. Now, how did you cast veteran actor Benedict Campbell to narrate the film?
We did some casting in Canada. We heard some a handful of actors read for the role, but when we heard Benedict, it was only Benedict at that point. Like as soon as we heard him read it, that's the voice that had been in my head since the start of the film. And he had previously worked with Nelvana, a company that some of us were working at in past years. I had never had the chance to work with him, but we heard him and it was him and he resonated with the project, so he agreed to do it. And I think he really shaped a huge part of that narrative. Just the way he delivers the lines, it feels like a bedtime story for adults.
It does. It does. When it comes to animated films, it's the narration, it's
Hmm.
the tone, the pacing, the right voice,
Right.
because really that's what adds the emotional depth to the whole film.
True. It's very true. And this, I found that the score, because it's narrated part of the film is narrated and the rest is dialogue free, and you're really relying on the score to carry you through. The score became another character for us, and we worked with Ryan Carlson. He did the whole score; is amazing, and that was such a fun process, I think, for Kevin and I to go through because he was drawing the audience through those emotions from the point where Christopher has a change of heart through that really emotional chase scene, I guess, through the sky and the snowstorm. And the score just it takes you along. And it was more than we could have hoped for.
Well, it's like watching Tom and Jerry. There's not any dialogue. It's all
No,
music creating in us the movement and the
yeah,
action. And so yeah, when it comes to animated film, especially 2D animation, it's the music that plays a whole new character. And you're right. I mean, you've got to get it right.
you got to get it right. I actually showed Christopher and the Bug to a group of kids early on and just to kind of walk them through the animation process. And I took that chase scene and showed them three different chunks of score on it just to show them how much music can inform the tone of a scene. And so when you put that chase scene against like a comedic kind of like womp, 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 it's completely different. The kids were laughing at it. And then once you get to Ryan's score, the one that fits, it's just that moment of like you're on the edge of your seat and you didn't even realize how important that music was going to be until you hear it.
Well, your co-director was Kevin McAuliffe.
Mhm.
What did you learn by working with him?
So I previously worked with Kevin on a television series, and so we had kind of a shorthand working together. But I got to learn sort of what creative inspirations fueled his vision for things. It's an interesting experience working with another director, especially on a project that had been sitting with me for so long and I had such a vision for. I was a little worried, how is this going to go? Is it going to be two people battling? But I was lucky because Kevin he didn't bring a competing theme to the film, which is excellent. We would sit down and talk through all the stages, and we were always in lockstep on how we wanted this to look, and that was super important. Even when we went to bring on the rest of the team, just making sure that everybody shared the end goal for this film and how we wanted it to feel. Because it could have, a story can be told many different ways, and this one we really wanted it to be told a certain way. So I think I did learn a lot about working with another director and just kind of seeing what they bring to the table based on like their creative preferences and what they worked on in the past.
Well, tell me about technical director Scott Williamson and art director Don Gutierrez. I know Don worked for Nelvana, and I know Michael Hirsch, who founded that company. I mean, literally giants in the world of animation. How did you get them on your team?
So I was very lucky because the whole team I had worked with on previous projects, everybody who worked on the team, I think everybody except for, people that we hired from the outside, like our composer and such, had been working on a Nelvana project at some point. So most of us had experience together previously. Don Goche he was actually the art director on the very first thing I ever produced called Spliced way back when. And because he had that beautiful painterly style, he just seemed like the absolute best choice for this because of the look that we were going for. Scott Williamson, I can't say enough about Scott. This project would not have gotten made without him. When you work with such a small team, you need people who can wear different hats. And Scott is just technically brilliant. And he also is an artist's technical person. So he will think about something, and then if he doesn't have the answer, rather than tell you, well, you got to change the way you do it, he'll just go and find out how you can execute what you want the final look to be, in a way that's possible for the budget and the pipeline. So Scott worked really tight. Dawn, Kevin, Lydia, and myself all just would get together in meetings weekly when we were producing and throw our questions on the table, and somebody had an answer for them. So it was a really great, tight knit team.
Well, I know that with film,
Mhm.
um, when the production is wrapped and you're going into post production, and then you're going to work with a colorist, and you're looking at different color palettes because color palettes can create the tone and the mood and the look of
Mhm.
a film. With 2D animation, how does that work? Because I'm sure you're probably looking at a color palette before you start.
Yes. So Don had set up, he would do color keys for every location that he was sharing with us. Like the establishing shot of Christopher's house that we see at the beginning of the film. Don created the first thing he ever showed us, I think, was a beautiful color palette options for that. Like, ooh, what if it's dusk? What if it's night? What if it's day? And obviously, with this film, Christopher's an owl, so the entire film pretty much takes place at night because night is his day. So we made a lot of those decisions up front. We did put the film through a color correct at the end, but it was very small, mostly because we were running out of time and budget, but also because all those decisions had been made and made so beautifully early on, and then throughout the BG painting, that we didn't really need much of it, but we did a little bit at the end.
Okay, I've always wondered the differences between color palettes between I know about live action, but when it comes to
Right.
animation, there it's a whole different ball game there. So thank
Yes.
you for the explanation because that really brings clarity for me to understand the true difference when it comes to a color palette. So how does it feel to be an official selection for the 50th Cleveland International Film Festival?
It's amazing. It's wonderful. The team is so excited. Myself and my co-producer Lydia Ferrer, we're going to go to Cleveland. We have a double screening that day because we're also screening in Toronto at the Taffy, the Toronto Animation Festival. So the team is dividing, but Lydia and I will be there to represent. There's nothing quite like watching it with an audience in a theater. I haven't been to Cleveland, but I understand that the theater is beautiful. So we're looking forward to taking in the city. And just sitting in the theater with the lights off and getting to watch and listen to other people react and experience the film. It's amazing. We've been in over 50 film festivals so far, and I've been lucky enough to be able to experience that. It's always the best with kids, in my opinion, because the kids' reactions are so honest and genuine. But just hearing people, gasp, I won't give it away, but there's that one scene in the film where Christopher just has that change of heart and realizes he was wrong. And when the audience sees what Christopher sees, there's usually that moment of, and you get to hear it. And it's just, it's so much better than watching it at home on my TV. So we're very excited to experience that and get to see all the other amazing films that are in the film festival. It's quite a big film festival.
It's a very big and it's a major, it's an Oscar qualifying film
That
festival.
it
So,
is.
we gotta do this. And because I think I want to see this film go all the way because it's
Oh,
it
thank
has
you.
all the elements to make it. And I can't believe that you've
Uh,
already been in 50 film festivals already with this with Christopher.
We have, yes, all globally. So some of them, smaller festivals, larger festivals. We've been in a few Oscar qualifying so far. We've just been so lucky. Honestly, it's a story that we hoped would resonate with people in different countries all around the world. That was our goal. And it has. So to see Christopher translated or subtitled into different countries and know that kids all over the globe have had the opportunity to see this film and hopefully take something from it. It's never lost on us, so we're very grateful.
So what do you hope audiences will take away from seeing Christopher and the Bug?
If I have one hope, it's that people walk away and have enjoyed it, first of all, but also ask themselves, like, is there something that I should be asking myself? Is there something in my life that's the bug that maybe I need to reflect on and possibly stop building that shack on my front lawn to get away from it? And I hope that maybe some people will find a little bit of happiness after seeing the film and maybe find themselves changed a little bit for the better, like Christopher.
I think that mission is going to happen with every
Oh.
audience that sees this film this year, especially at Cleveland International. So it's going to be something to see. And ladies and gentlemen, at its heart, Christopher and the Bug follows Christopher, a reclusive owl whose quiet, solitary life is disrupted when a tiny, uninvited bug moves into his home. Now, what begins as a series of comical attempts to reclaim his space gradually transforms into an unexpected journey toward connection. Now, as Christopher confronts his own fears and misunderstandings, he discovers the transformative power of empathy, companionship, and opening oneself up to others. Now, Christopher and the Bug is a heartwarming short film, again, about this reclusive owl whose peaceful solitude again is disrupted by this tiny little bug. It is one incredible film. It's a charming tale. It's designed to resonate with audiences of all ages and it reminds us to embrace differences and find connection in unexpected places. It is so wonderful to see animated films like this one. The animation is A-list quality. The storytelling is endearing, funny, and of course, heartwarming. And I will say this, the Academy loves heartwarming. So we're gonna speak this film into being when it comes that time, and hopefully to see this because I believe this film should be a multi-award winning animated short. And again,
Mm.
everything about this animated short already screams, like I said, award winning, and I will be following its journey this year for sure. And I want to thank you, Vanessa, for creating such an amazing film and much success to you and your whole team this year with Christopher and the Bug.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the chance to talk about this film.
Oh, absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, if any of you are attending Cleveland International Film Festival or any film festival in which Christopher and the Bug has been made an official selection, you better make sure that you are sitting in the audience because this is one animated short film you do not want to miss. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can watch or listen to all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, iTunes, and more. And remember, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.